Hello, I'm Dr. Margaret Rogers Van Coops. You are about to learn more about the soul structure coding, something I've been actually teaching for over 40 years. But currently, people are beginning to be interested in why they've actually got DNA that is encoded from their ancestors. And so, what I'm going to do here in this 1 hour is to teach you what the soul coding is. So let's begin with the beginning. In ancient times, long ago, long forgotten, things that you can't remember, in ages that have long disappeared, even before dinosaurs and things like that, when God made us through the energy of the angels, we were created under the moods, the impressions of evolvement as it was in the early beginning. And if we talk about gas becoming liquid, and then we talk about liquid becoming solids, and then we talk about being able to manipulate the molecules of that solid mass, we're looking at our bodies internally, even now, through the digestive system, the way that we protect ourselves from germs and things, the lymphatic system, and of course our muscular neural memory, we have everything that we absolutely need to have in order to survive in this world. And we have evolved, of course, over eons of time and become these people today who are very tech-minded. But in the beginning, we were not so evolved. We were more animalistic. And even today, I would point out here that all animals, no matter what they are, including all insects, have a soul structure coding. And so we can't get away from it because it's very important. Now, the main part that begins our life is created under the vibration of what the lessons were going on at the time of evolvement. So let us think of God as this very wise being who, after a certain amount of time, got pretty bored sitting on his throne saying, I'm the Almighty, the greatest one. And in its own way, set apart energy from itself. And I use the analogy of an arm, saying, hey, I'm going to give this arm motivation, drive, and ambition to go out there and use its molecular source of energy to create. And so it went forward, now separate from the body of God, to see what it could discover. And in its nature of discovering, what we discover in ourselves every day of our life is the wisdom of the sage. So what is the wisdom of the sage? It's knowing when to express your emotions and use them in a very productive way versus, spouting words at people, dominating them, and aggressive ideas about all the things that you think you know. And of course, if you're dominating someone, it's very negative because nobody wants to be preached to, and nobody wants orations of any kind that rage on and on forever and ever. What we want is to emotionally identify with the things that people talk about. Now, if we go back in history and we think about Nordic people invading England, in my example, or going all the way over to Russia, which they were able to do, and influence different lands, and we think about nomadic people, tribes, and people living in jungles, wherever their environment is, and learning to adapt. And the way to learn to adapt was to understand that one is alive for a purpose. So once the sage had been manifested, those aspects of form, whether they were angels, master ascended beings, had mystical abilities still in those days to transform and change themselves. And so over time, they learned more about how to express positively versus, talking and going on in whatever way, dominating the situation, and realized that they needed to be more creative, just like the God, the Father figure is. And so they subdivided themselves and created artisans. Now, artisans are in the mirror image of the creator, given carte blanche, as it were, to be inventors, to come up with ideas and through emotional, spontaneous impulses, make it happen. So, in the beginning, let's say if you wanted to be a wizard and make your little bunny rabbit disappear in your hat and then reappear again, it was actually possible in those days, many, many years ago. The spirit energy that was in any form at that time had no consistency in being stuck in its form, so it could come and go and change. But over time, when you have too much created, we get into mine is better than yours, my thing is nicer than yours, and we get this artifacts, which means I'm going to be artful and I'm going to impose my creative thing over you and tell you it's better than your creative thing. And of course, over time, oneness, God, archangels, could see that there was sort of disagreement here going on. We needed something more. And the artisan said, well, I'm the creator, so I should subdivide my aspects and manifest people, things in the form of priest. Now, what was priest? Priest is supposed to be the person who's the counselor, the one who's going to say, I'm looking at the sage and I'm seeing the emotions and I'm seeing the way they're talking. I'm looking at the artisan and I'm seeing the things that they create. And I'm also seeing these people who are, fixed in their habits and their routines and say, this is all I know. So what I need to do is to come in and be sort of like an ombudsman in a way and say, hey, I have compassion for what you feel. I care about what you feel. And I have, in a sense, enthusiasm to stimulate you to get out of your rut and do something better. And the negative side of the priest is zeal, because you can get so over enthusiastic that you can dominate the scene again and push people to do what you want them to do instead of doing what everybody feels intuitively they want to do. So for a while we had sages, artisans and priests in various forms, or not necessarily staying stuck in those forms and integrating with those forms. And given time, it was realized that we needed someone who would be volunteering, if you like, to be a supporter. And so what came from that was the priest said, I will create slaves. Now, slaves is our modern word for it, and really we didn't have slaves back in the beginning of time. But what they really meant is service. And slaves will serve with honor and truth. They love what they do. They're not really slaving away at the computer. They enjoy creating things on the computer, and the hours go by and they think, wow, I've achieved this great thing on the computer. Well, imagine going back in time and you're exploring and you find some raspberries and you come back and say, look what I found, raspberries, and everybody says, oh, may I have some more? And you think, well, I've only got a few. I better go out and get a few more for people. So what you do is you go out and find more and bring them home. And that way you're serving, you're sharing. But of course, if you were asked to go out and pick whatever fruits you could find in a tribal sense, day in, day out, and everybody expected you to turn up with them, there would come a time when you would think, I'm being used. Why doesn't someone else go and collect the berries for me? I'll try and delegate and say, would you go out and get them for me? And people say, well, no, it's your job. You're supposed to be getting those berries all the time. Okay, how long is it before you feel you are tied down by what you started? That people now see you as the authority of collecting berries, and if you don't do it, they're going to be angry with you because they don't know how to get the berries or where you went and got them. So you feel in bondage. You feel tied down to what you've created. And of course, given time, you would want to manifest something in you that says, I'm a leader. I'm going to show people where those berries grow and so on. Or I'm going to, in modernisms, I'm going to show someone how to work the computer so I don't have to always be the one in front of it. And so the slave energy of the archangels and of the oneness decided to separate again and make the king. Now, the king is like sitting on his throne, I'm master, but what we're really looking at is someone who can organize everything. I need you to go and pick berries for me now, and the artisan needs a break, so I'm going to ask the sage to go and pick the berries, or I'm going to ask the slave, would you go and teach people and show people where the berries are? Well, of course, if we come forward in time, the king, in the way we look at it today, is sitting on the throne and saying, I need my government. And I need each one of my government people to be responsible for what they are doing so that they can report back to me and tell me that everybody is satisfied, that everybody has, shall we say, all that they need, their cake and eat it if you like, their food, they have their work, they have their purpose in living life. And hear that, King wants people to have a purpose in living. So they will present themselves as a master. And they've studied whatever it is they've mastered, and they want to share it with people who want to copy and learn from them. But every once in a while we find that people who are masters of something start dominating the scene and saying things like, well, my way is the best way, and if you don't do it my way, I'll have to force you. And if you don't do it, I'll make you write 400 million lines in school, or I'll lock you in prison because you've not followed my rules. And of course, that becomes tyranny. And we don't use that word these days because we tend to think of tyranny as someone who's going against the country, someone who's being disloyal to the king, and these kinds of things. But actually, we can be very disloyal to one another. We can actually lie and cheat and rationalize that we're doing whatever the king wants us to do, the boss wants us to do at work, and yet at home we're grumbling and wishing we had more authority ourselves to do things in our own way. And it's only a matter of time before tyrannical people are going to rise up and go to the king and say, you're dominating me, you're not leading me very well, or you're leading me in the wrong direction, I don't want this. And so the king often finds himself challenged. And that is in its way good. And of course, they're not necessarily kings, it could be queens, but we're staying with the male images since that was where it was given to me right in the beginning many years ago. So the king masters his skill. Now, you could be a nurse, for example, and you've mastered everything about it, and then you start to notice that the houseman doctors, we call them, interns, come into the hospital and they don't really know where anything is, and they forget what medicines they're supposed to give, whereas the nurses are giving it all the time, so they remember the names and this thing. And I know even when I was nursing back when I was 18, 19, and 20, I knew a lot more than a lot of the interns knew because I'd been studying nursing since I was 15. So there are different things and different ways that we learn, and the king has to know how to make allowances for those who don't know anything, make ways for them to do lessons and learn things, and not treat people like they're slaves or, judge them and condemn them, but rather pull them into what's going on so that people feel they're a part of the growth of their life and of the lives of others. So the king actually is uniting people by his position. And if you talk about being in a hospital, as my little example, head nurse may well be very responsible for uniting all the doctors, all the nurses, all the technicians, and so on by knowing who's who and what they're doing. Things change and the world changes and we have to adapt. Now, out of that organizing, getting things done came the warrior, because what we wanted was to let other people know who haven't seen us yet or haven't understood we're in form or have come into form but don't know why they're in form, to want to learn. So the warrior's job is not to fight, but to cut a pathway through the jungle, as it were, symbolically, and explore and find out new things that people didn't know, and then come back along that pathway and say, I've cut this pathway, I've seen A, B, and C, and D. If you'd like to go and see for yourself, I can persuade you by saying, I'll take you along the pathway to a certain point, but after that, you're on your own, because I'm a pioneer. I have to begin. And actually, my core energy from the oneness is a warrior. And so throughout my life, you can see I started out as a young child of 5, healing the war casualties, which is written in my book, My Journey into the Oneness. So if you want to know about my life, that's the book to read. But this is not about my life. This is about you understanding the soul structure coding. So the warrior has two sides, negative and positive. The positive is to persuade, the negative is coercion. That's like saying, I'll give you $1 if you clean up your bedroom. That's coercion. I want you to come along this pathway. If you come along this pathway, I'll promise you that you will have something better than what you've got now. Now, of course, that promise might be an empty promise. You end up finding that you've learned a lot, but you haven't got any presents. You haven't got any prizes of any kind. Don't worry, you've learned to be a pioneer. Okay. Now, the last but not least is all this is going on. There's a sage, there's an artisan, a priest, a slave, a king, and a warrior. And now we need someone who's going to really be collecting information. And that is a scholar. And the scholar goes about collecting everything that everybody talks about. You might call them a modern day reporter today, but does that mean that all the information is relative to every single one of us? Not always. But to the oneness, that knowledge is important, because the oneness needs to know absolutely everything that every single one of us, whether it's animal, insect, reptile, or human, that we are doing something, that we are creating energy that allows this world to evolve and grow. And of course, when we look back over billions of years, we can see that we have evolved a great deal. Now, the thing about the scholar is we have to watch. We don't get stuck in too much theory. You know, I found an old bone, and in my opinion, it's tested by whatever test we have, and I found this and I found that, and I've decided this and I've decided that, and this is fact. Well, maybe a while later, but someone will come along and blow that fact out of the water and say, no, we found some more tests, and so we have a little bit more knowledge. So the scholar tends to play around with what is facts, what is false, what is truth, and feed that information back to the oneness so that the oneness knows everything that's going on. Now, when you come into embodiment, you want to have a purpose. You want to have a goal. You want to understand what is going on in your life. And, you could have many lives with the same goal. But that'd be a bit boring if you had to have nothing but the same goal day in, day out. And so I'm going to run quickly through these without going too much into detail. We have acceptance and rejection, and opposite is one pulls the other. They work in pairs. So you might be friendly with someone who has a goal of acceptance where they say, oh, I really love this, I really like that, even if you don't. And you on the other side in rejection might be saying, I don't know why you like that. It really doesn't work for me. Now, what is the point of acceptance and rejection? It teaches us that in acceptance we can have joy and pleasure, but we can also be, shall we say, overcrowded with too much joy and pleasure, and then we get sort of that we don't care, we're not grateful anymore. Okay, so then we need the person who's in rejection to come along and say, I can see what you're doing. I discriminate between what's good and what's bad. And so I'm helping you to understand that, you can't sit on the fence all day and just say, I enjoy. And you have to get out and about and test stuff and see what you feel. And I'll test you. I'll throw a few spanners in the work, as it was, we say in English. And of course, if you're in the negative of rejection, you could be prejudiced. And you could really be saying, oh, and have lots of bad things to say. And if you do that, yes, you drive people away. The second pair that we often choose one or the other is growth and retardation. Growth is actually a very good one to have, and I have that in my coding in this life because it gives me the chance to understand, to comprehend many more things that are outside of the box that every normal person learns. And so my psychic ability is really pushed into asking questions of the spirit and the oneness so that I can teach you. So I understand a lot more than people realize about the soul coding, but I can't do all the details of it today. And in the negative, if I have too much information, yes, I can be confused. But in being confused, I'm going to question more and search more. Now, if I get tired and I'm overexhausted, someone who's got retardation can come into my life and be a model and say, I'm actually lazy, I'm going to sit here and do nothing. We call that atavism. But really, what we're saying is, I can't enjoy my life. I can't be what I want to be. It could be you have something wrong with your brain or your body, which is not your fault. But on the other side, you could be drinking alcohol and doing drugs, and you're just a jumpy jello living and walking around in a space of don't know what. And that would be a big lesson for me to come along and understand you and help you see that you don't need to be focused in this way. Now, a lot of people, when they're dealing with retardation, actually, if they're doing behavioral issues or their body is defaulted in some way, will withdraw from society. They don't want to be a part of society because it's too much effort and too much going on to want to even try. But those people who have retardation are very important. So if you have a baby that's not fully functional, or you have a relative that's really playing up and going down the wrong pathway, don't blame them and shame them so much. They're your test. They're trying to see if you know a better way of living your life. And in that way, to be a living example that you can show them without bothering them to make them follow you. And sometimes those people will suddenly see the good in them and be motivated to try and do the best they can in atavism, while coming out of withdrawal and wanting to go on and copycat and learn from other people. The second two that you could choose from are dominance and submission. Dominance can be good. You can be a master and kind and loving and warm and a leader. Okay, that's what we need, a leader in dominance. But if you're, like a dictator in Iran, telling people you have to have this religion, you can't be that, and you have to, do this, or China's doing the same, nobody can have their religion, they have to learn communism. Okay, whoever's in charge there is going to be carrying dominance as their goal. And the people who are interacting with that have to learn that they can say no, okay? And they can submit to other things that are around in their life and fight for what they believe in. But if you're under a dictatorship where you're punished, it's a bit difficult, isn't it? But then again, it tests you on how much you have strength and endurance within you, within your character and your personality, to rise above that kind of thing and be a light to others. By shining it, you become dominant. Now, if you're in submission, then you would be having to learn the difference between devotion to something, i.e. God, the temple, being a minister in this life, or a devotion to a career that you just love to do, versus being submissive in the sense that you're subservient, let's say. You let people order you around and control you. Well, why would you want to go into that space? Simply because you want to learn. You haven't got any power, and you need to understand there's power in you. And that brings me to the last one, stagnation. Stagnation is usually people that have been born with brain problems that don't last very long. They're suspended, as it were, in that they can't really do the things that everyone else does, but they serve a very important part of life, because those of us who can do stuff can take care of them, and in the process of nurturing them, we learn to appreciate ourselves, our skills, our talents, and so on. In the negative of stagnation, we have inertia. In other words, a zombie. They're not really alive, if you like, but even so, their spirit is. And this is where their spirit is observing the world around them in preparation for another life. And so a lot of young babies are born, they don't live too long, they want to catch up on where we're at, and then come back later in a new body and not be, blocked from learning, but rather the opposite. So stagnation does serve a purpose for the spirit of an individual to be a tester to those who are not in inertia, and for those who are, suspended by trauma, in a coma, this kind of thing. They are testing their spirit as to whether they want to live or die, and all the people around them that love them are being tested on how much they love. So it really tests love. Now, in order for everyone to come into embodiment, I'm going to be quick about this, we need modes. We need one for the way we express ourselves, we need one for inspiration, and we need one for action. Now I'm going to talk about me for a minute and mention mine. I have power, passion, and perseverance. So what that means is I can be an authority figure on what I know, or I could be losing my power by putting myself in situations where others who are powerful oppress me. I had that in my upbringing. My father was very dominant. My mother was very dominant, and I was always oppressed by my school teachers who told me I'd never amount to anything. But I worked through it. I had a death scenario. You can read that in my book again, My Journey into Oneness. And as a result, came out of it awakening to the true essence of my spirit, rather than the psychic child that I'd been for many years until I was about 35. I awakened to the master within me. And so with expression in my heart, I was able to bring it from my heart, awakening the feelings up into my brain, and then transform that into thought forms where I could teach. Okay? When I was oppressed, I couldn't think anything. I was like, everything's confusing, and I know so much, and nobody wants to listen to me. And everybody would say, you're weird and strange, and so on. Okay? It wasn't a very nice time. But there's a lot of you out there that are going through that. But know that one day you will put it all together like I did and will work for you. Now, repression for me comes from my mind. And that came into my mind. So here I had Mum and Dad teaching me there are rules and regulations, teachers telling me I'll never spell, and I'm dyslexic, came later in life, didn't know that when I was a child. So all these different things are in my way for my learning. And people were restraining me, controlling me. You can't do this. You have to behave this way. You must conduct yourself like a lady. And you must speak the Queen's English. If I listen to recordings of how I used to speak in England on my cassettes, which I hope to share later sometime, you would say it's not me talking. Because I've been able to find my own way to talk, having traveled the world teaching, and also living in America. So my English is kind of changed, my sentence formatting is changed, and I'm me. And that's wonderful. And so I can share whatever wisdom I have with no restraint, because I've learned that I can tell and teach whatever I know, and I don't need to restrain because my emotions will tell me enough's already, they can't handle anymore. So that's my stopping place. I mix the power and the repression together, and I borrow that sometimes because it's not in my coding, but it was in my father's coding. And so I was told I couldn't mix with different people, different colors, or I had to act like a lady and walk, with my head held high and all these kinds of things. So I borrowed that one. And you might find you're borrowing something from your mom or your dad. So I had power and perseverance. And perseverance was there in my action. No matter how many times my father said, "You can't play with some child up the road, he's not our class," I was sneaking out and I was playing and I was having fun and made sure I got home before Dad did, even though Mum knew. Okay, so I wasn't a liar, but I did learn to lie when I had passion, because passion is self-actualizing. And in order to cover up some issues, things that happened in my life, I lied. Because a friend taught me to lie. I didn't know about lying before that. I was honest. And I got suffering for it. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have done that. And you get to a point where you say, well, what do I want to do? And if I have to lie to that person in order to get what I want, I will. So passion gives us the art to lie if we want to. But there's the other side where we can just go out and do it and let people watch us and go, oh, how did you do that? So I learned that. And it did get me a lot of attention. I worked on stage, I worked in public eyes, I was all over the place in England, and I became very famous for my accuracy as a medium. But I wasn't satisfied, I wanted more. And so I searched more until I had a breakdown and found I had Parkinson's disease. When I was given that, I was realizing that I had inherited the Parkinson's disease from my father, who just started it in his late 50s, my grandmother, who already had it and was in her 70s and looking to die soon, and her father, who had it, who also died from it with pneumonia, because Parkinson's doesn't kill you. And I took one look at that and I said, I'm not going to go that way. There's got to be another way. And you can see by me today, I'm not shaking. So you can understand I found the cure. Now, I'm not going into all of that now. I just want you to understand that passion motivates you, drives you, even in the negative, to identify what is wrong. And once you identify what is wrong, then you can self-actualize, motivate yourself to change the way you think and feel. And that's exactly what I did. I used my power to listen to my guides in their authority form, to teach me how to do things the right way for myself, and dumping my father's repression that I couldn't do stuff by restraining me, to lie, to go and do the things that I wanted to do, and ultimately to come to a point where perseverance would allow me to keep on doing what I wanted to do, no matter what anybody said. And yes, the negative is immutable. So sometimes there's times when I will say, I'm sorry, it doesn't matter what you say, I am stuck on this because I know this is the right way. Are there a few times when I feel someone's telling me a truth and I need to adapt? Yes. Mutability needs to have a softening when there's times that you need to use it. Now, I'm going to use someone else that I know to give you the other ways that it could be. You could have caution, passion, and aggression, okay? Or you could have caution, passion, and observation. these can be mixed up. All of these that I'm mentioning can be mixed up in your coding in your DNA. Now, your DNA carries the personalities of your mum and your dad and your grandmas or grandpas on both sides and your great-grandmas and your great-grandpas. The DNA carries all of that, and each one of those had modes that gave them their personality. So we're just going to go here with caution and repression and aggression, just to see. Caution says, I'm going to deliberate. I'm not sure if I want to do this or not. Let me weigh it up, pros and cons and so on. And if I decide I know what I'm doing, I'll move on and I'll say I'm positive with caution. But if I'm negative, I'll worry about it so much, I'll get so anxious that I'll develop phobias. And those phobias really are real to me. And I just cannot go near water because I'm going to drown, or I won't go up in an aeroplane because it's going to crash, just to give you a few examples. And the repression says, don't get on that boat, or don't get in to that person's life because they'll ruin you. And the inhibitions that you have are there because you created them by telling yourself, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that, I don't know when or where. Or maybe your parents told you that. You'll never grow up to be something. You're not trying hard enough. You're not good in school. Your homework's lousy. I had all that. You need to try harder. And these teachers that I had were often like that. Little did I know why they were repressing me. But I came to understand when I got a lot older that that was to test me, to see if I could break the boundaries that were put on me and become more. Okay, so aggression. Aggression is the fighter, okay? I'm going to be dynamic. I'm going to go out and show you. I'm going to run in my sports classes. I'm going to be the best in tennis. And I'm going to, that was the best way I could be. I want to be an actress. I want to sing. I want to dance. I wanted my creative self to express me. That was my journey. And my mother, she sung, she did ballet before she became a cripple. And so I was given that through her to go for what I wanted, to believe in my dreams as singing, dancing, acting, and so on. I did a lot of that as a child. But my father, he was on the other side saying, you're a lady, you've got an ancestry, you've got all this history, you have to act like a lady, so you must go forward with aggression and say I'm a leader. Okay, so I had it coming from both of them. And that was where a lot of times those two would argue, because aggression, when you got two people full of aggression, I don't agree with you and whatever. So, yep, I grew up with an angry family. And the last one is observation. And that I want to give to my sister, because my sister was very good at observing everyone and still is today, and is a good psychic. And she is able to help people understand where they're fixed and what they're doing and how they can change. So she's very good at observing body language, knowing when people make excuses or whatever. And so she's encoded with clarity. And she's able to download from her spirit guides clear things for herself, for her family, and she's very certain, sure, because she also has power and passion like me. So we can get along in a lot of ways, and we're both very psychic. But when she's in surveillance, she is stuck. This is what I've seen, this is what I believe, and this is what I do. Now, that's her way, and that's okay, because the people who come to her for help, they want that surveillance. They want her to say, well, this is what I've noticed, okay? But it's hard for her to notice it in herself, okay? Because when we're in surveillance, we're rationalizing, we're excusing, we're justifying, and a lot of people need a lot of help to see that they're actually doing it. So I want you to understand how important your modes are in your soul coding, and so that you can understand exactly what you're doing all the time. Now, when you're in your mother's womb, your mother is in this state. Now, depending on her psychological and emotional state of being, she could be an idealist where she wants the perfect baby in the world and the perfect job and the perfect dad and the perfect everything. She could be a skeptic. I doubt. I don't know if this is right or wrong or whether it should or shouldn't be. She could be a spiritualist where she's very into God, or different religions and philosophies where she has faith and hope and trust that all will work out. She could be a stoic where she's trying to be tranquil and just say it is what it is and I can't do much about it, so I'm just resigned to live the way it is. Here I am pregnant and I'm going to have a baby and I don't know what's going to happen, kind of thing. Then there's a realist. I'm having a baby and I've got a perception of what this baby's going to be, because I'm in the nursing profession. I would like him or her to be a doctor, and I suppose I'll have to teach them all the things that I know and so on, that kind of thing. Or they could be a cynic. Everything I ever do, there's always someone who's contradicted to me. Nobody ever agrees with me. I've got to just stay away and stay in my own space and have this baby, and nobody really know what I'm doing, but leave me alone because I know what I'm doing. And of course, in the negative, help, I don't know what I'm doing, I need help. I just absolutely expect the worst, and my baby may be born with 3 toes instead of 10 toes, and all these kinds of things. And of course, it's not so good if the baby's in her womb coming out with a cynic. And then we could have the pragmatists. The pragmatists, they're dominant. They want you to be practical. They want everything right. So, okay, I'm painting the room blue, and we're going to have certain shoes and certain styles, and we're going to have classes as soon as baby can talk so we can get baby well educated. I'm going to give practical advice on what is good for them and make sure they have plenty of opportunities and so on. But hey, we have to watch that you're not filling their heads with your dogma, your ideas of what's good for them, when they may not want to do anything at all. I had a situation where someone put someone in a uni for studying computers because they thought that was really good for them. And the child screwed up and didn't want to do that. And they came to me in Japan and said, what am I going to do about my child? They're not doing. I'm paying all this money. I want them to be qualified in computer graphics. And I said, no, because although they're artistic and creative, you've put them in the wrong career. They would do much better if they were in something practical, like helping people recover from accidents, become a physiotherapist. She looked at me in amazement and said, a physiotherapist? I said, yes, you go and ask them. Well, today that person became my student. They're actually a metaphysiotherapist, and they've learned to entwine many different therapies and heal people very easily. So that was fulfilling. And the mother, she ended up being a patient of mine and healing her as well. So you see, there are ways and means. So we won't spend too much, but the attitudes are cycles of periods in how we feel. But we do come in with one ourselves that is our primary one, that's for us. I came in with the idealist. And what that means is I have to learn to coalesce the bad and the good. I have to find the middle road, the Buddhic way. And I think I've achieved that pretty well throughout my life. But it didn't come easily. I had to have a lot of negatives before I started to find that there were some positives. And I've just turned 77, and I'm in what would be the physical 11th cycle of 7 years of rejuvenation. So I hope you're watching me and think, hey, she looks pretty young. But the bottom line is it's not about my youth, it's about rejuvenation. And if you're following your soul coding and you're working with it, you're going to rejuvenate. If you're fighting your soul structure coding, then you're going to get sick. And I know about sick. I've been sick, like I told you, Parkinson's disease. So we have to deprogram ourselves of the ancestors and the DNA. Now, what we also have to know is that when we come into embodiment, our spirit has a coding. And briefly, we're either going to have a high intellectual or a high emotional center. And if we have one of those or both of those, we're highly psychic and highly sensitive to everyone that we meet. We inspire, we know, and we share and we love and we give. And I'm fortunate to have both of those. And I also have what we call a moving center, which means my crown chakra is able to receive the Holy Host. So, yes, I can heal and do all sorts of weird and wonderful and strange things. Now, other people might have what we call a normal intellectual and a normal emotional center, and that means they're not meant to be consciously psychic, they're instinctive. That means they run on what they've learned in this world. And so they would say, I went to this class and I studied this class, and this is what I know, and this is what I use in my life. My feelings about what I do are clear. I know I like it or I don't like it, and I make my choices accordingly. And if they have what we call a sexual center, that's the base chakra, that's down where your private part is. That means you're very earthy, you're very grounded to the earth, you love nature, you love sports, you love your body, you love doing all the things that you want to do. Some of us were master teachers will use both the higher mind and the sexual center. But there is another one, the instinctive one. The instinctive one comes from the higher mind body. It comes through the spirit body, it comes through the etheric body, which is your lower emotions and mind, right into your physical body. And instinctively, it will give you the ability to atomically, if you like, rebuild your cells and rejuvenate and give you a sense of divine presence within your being. And if it's anatomic, it could be in the negative that you are deformed in some way, but you have a purpose. For example, I met someone who had had a car accident. They were born normal, but they lost an arm, and it seemed like the end of the world at the time. But it taught them to use the other arm, and in the process, it switched their brain from left hemisphere to right hemisphere, and they became more practical. And as a result of that, today that person is actually a lecturer and teacher and doing very wonderfully well all over the place. And he asked me, why did this happen? I said, because you were borrowing the instinctive in order to overcome your lower intellectual mind so that you could gain the ability to move and not let losing an arm stop you from doing the things you wanted to do. Occasionally, a baby will be born with an instinctive center. They usually don't last very long. They're there to teach a lesson to the mother and father about parenting or about their life in general, and to appreciate who they are and what they have, rather than to walk around saying, I haven't got anything. And of course, the loss of a child is very painful. Usually, if a child is instinctive, they're very, very wise, very knowing, very bright, spark little kids who suddenly have cot deaths or have a sudden accident, unfortunately, and leave this world, or have a sudden disease and leave this world. And in some way, what they're doing is they're leaving behind the memory of who they are and teaching us in some way that our spirit is sensitive and is encoded. Now, the last aspect that I want to share with you is the chief feature. Chief features are not nice, okay? They're basically sounding horrible, but if you didn't have them, you wouldn't be able to do the things that you want to do. Okay, so here they are. I'm going to read them out. Greed, self-destruction, arrogance, self-deprecation, impatience, martyrdom, and, yes, stubbornness. Now, we can borrow any of them. We can use them all, but one is our primary one. Now, for example, right now I'm seeing a lot of greed all over the world. So we've got a collective consciousness of greed. We all want more insurance, we all want more money, we all want independence, we all want change. It goes on and on. and that comes under greed. And when we have that kind of energy going on collectively in the way the world is living, as it were, then we have a lot of problems because we have controversy. Some of us want everything to fit just into our own ego and suit us just to our own little world. And so we're ferocious about that. We're like a pig, gobbling up anything and everything we can get because we're clinging to it, and we need it, and we want it, and we believe we can't live without it. Others of us think about our ego and what we're showing to the world. And hey, I've had this for a while and now I don't really need it. I can move on. Or I know something that other people would like to learn. So I'm going to go out there and proclaim myself and PR, online and say, I've got a class coming up. Would you like to join me? It's not bad. That's a good thing to have that kind of greed. And self-destruction, we tend to sacrifice ourselves. I'll do this class for you because I'd sooner have 24 students at $5 than only one at $5. So I don't think I'm that good, so I'll only charge $5. But what if you charged $100 and only one turned up? Wouldn't that be nicer? So you have to realize that your worth and your value is important under self-destruction. You don't want to be devaluing all that you are. You don't want to be making yourself a sacrificial lamb. So if you're cooking Sunday dinner and you've got friends over, you could be first to dish up your own plate and sit down and eat it first and say to everyone, help yourself. Okay? Yum, yum. I'm eating it before it gets cold. I've done that quite a few times. Okay? Because people are talking, and if I wait till they're all talking, everything is on the table, it's stone cold, and then I've got to microwave it because I like hot dinner. Okay, so you have to see that. Now, the negative is immutable, and we are sometimes fixed, and we have to admit that. We need to be immutable. I mean, if someone tells you jump over off a boat into the ocean and there's no life-saving or anything, why would you do it? You got to be fixed. You got to have that part of you that says, no way. Okay, so we can borrow that. We can borrow all parts of these, by the way. Arrogance says, I have pride. I have pride in what I do. And that's good. You need pride. You don't want to just say something I do. Everybody's going to say it's just something she does. Nobody's going to be bothered about you. But if you're prideful in the sense of arrogantly bragging, then that's not very good, is it? But to say, yeah, I do this and I love doing it, and I'm willing to share how I do it with you if you'd like to learn from me, is a good one. And you need that pride to say, I'm a teacher of people, or I'm a healer of dogs and cats, or I'm a talker in class or something. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you enjoy doing what you do. Now, if you're too arrogant, then people are going to say, well, I don't really want to be with you because you're vain. Oh, look at my hair. It's got to be just right before I stand up in front of people before I talk. Oh, I have to wear the right clothes so I set the view of what I want and how people should look in my company. These are things in the past. These are from history. These are from class. But yet, there are still people saying, I can't go in front of a camera without my makeup on. Okay, I've done some like that, just to show myself I could. But the truth is, I like makeup, so I enjoy it. So why shouldn't I use it? That isn't arrogance. That's just fun. Okay, and so don't mix up your different parts. It's okay to be happy, being prideful if you've got to dress up. But if you're dressing up to impress others rather than impress yourself, then it can go awry. Okay? Self-deprecation, humility. We all want to be humble, but we don't want to be, I'm just not good enough, and I mark myself down compared with so-and-so up the road. They're a 10, I'm a 3. You need to build up your self-esteem, your self-worth, and your self-value. They're all parts of you, and you need to give yourself credit. Nobody should be a 10 because there's no room for growth, but at least you should be around a 7. So, being humble is good, but humiliating yourself. No, you don't want to do that because that takes you into a basement. You know, laying on the floor and saying, I don't care about anyone is a basement. You're saying nobody cares about me. That's what the example is. And nobody will care about you, and they'll just let you lay on the floor forever and ever. If you think about a transient that's wandering the world and having a good time searching everything, then they're not wasting their life. But if you see them on the sidewalk full of alcohol and drugs and so on, then they're wasting their life. They're in a basement. So don't be quick to judge when you see someone in self-deprecation, because they might be learning a lot about the world and eventually come back to put themselves together again and go out and teach, because a lot of teachers do things a hard way. Impatience. A lot of people get impatient and they have the nerve, the audacity to jump in and cut someone off. You know, we have to really think, is this a good point to jump in? And, you know, there are people we can't tolerate. We're intolerant of them because they're so aggressive and bossy and pushy. Okay, walk away. Don't fight with them. Okay? And then we have martyrdom. You know, people who just want to selflessness all the time. Well, we weren't made to be a zombie, you know. So selflessness comes from times when you need to be. Like if you want to be a monk and live in a monastery and just pray, or a nun, then okay, that would be in order for you. But it wouldn't do very good if you're working in a busy office with 900 people all saying, hurry up and get something done. You would be running around like a chicken with your head cut off, wouldn't you? So you wouldn't want to be a martyr. If we get the negative, mortification takes us into suicide. I don't want to live. I don't have any purpose. What's the point? Nothing works for me. You know, if you're one of those, you need to meet someone who is in self-deprecation and take a leaf out of their book and realize you're learning to build up self-esteem, self-worth, and self-value. And last but not least is stubbornness. If you're stubborn, okay, you might be determining something. You want to figure out what is right for you to do. So you need to be stubborn. If someone's pushing you, like my father was, to be go in the army and be a nurse that way, I didn't want that. And the more he went on about it, the more he said, I'm not doing it. And I was determined to not do that. So then it came up, I thought, well, I could think about the Air Force. And I went in and had a chat, sort of person, came out, told him, oh, now he wanted me to be a lieutenant. And I said, oh, no, I'm not determined to follow your lead, the family lead, because everyone was always in some force or other, going right back in history. So I said, no, I'm going to do it my way. So I came, as my father called me, a skivvy, wiping bottoms. He soon learned over the years and became my student that I was doing much more than that. Yes, nursing took me into psychology and psychiatry. It took me into NLP long before it was even discovered. It took me into hypnosis long before it was ever recognized. So by the time I was 19, my spirit guides had taught me all those things. And today I'm a professor of my field in metaphysical trainings of many different therapies, and I'm able to help a lot of people. So I've got through the soul structure coding in 58 minutes, which is for you to understand how you are encoded through the DNA and the RNA. So a little quick word, RNA is all the things that people have told you to believe, that you've accepted as your belief. Time to go through that list and erase the ones that are obsolete, that don't apply to you anymore. Pull out the ones that still do apply and ask you, am I really still validating those beliefs that I was given so long ago? So, for example, if you were given a belief to behave like a lady, that isn't one you necessarily want to delete, because we all appreciate a woman when she is ladylike. However, if you're walking around with your nose stuck up in the air and you're saying you're a lady and those people are beneath me, then you need to get rid of that, just as an example. So there are 1,000,001 trillion suggestions that have been given to you that you've taken in through hypnosis, while talking, being with different people from friends and enemies that you need to get rid of. So that means do some soul searching research. And the last but not least thing I want to say is, if you would like me to download your soul structure coding for you with all the explanations about your psychological personality and character, it takes me 2 hours or more. I'm charging $400 for it, but it will serve you throughout your entire life. So it is well worth the expense. Normally, I would be charging $600 for this. So this is a special if you've been listening to this. Now, contact me, drmargaretrvc@gmail.com. It'll be listed below in the text. And write to me, head it, I want my soul structure coding, please. I'll know the rest. Thank you for listening to this, and do watch out for my book, Donald Trump, The Enigma of Society, which explains his soul structure so you can understand how important yours is too. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.